Synagogue. He's also a clinical psychologist. Prior to his position at Barnet, he was the Rabbi of Kingston Surbiton, and he's held several other communal roles. With his psychological hat on, he currently works in the NHS at Ballista Hospital in Stevenage, working in mental health liaison, focusing on the relationship between physical and mental health and the management of acute mood difficulties and stress. Rabbi Landau also has an interest in adult mental stress, spirituality, meditation and mindfulness, and the interaction between physical and psychological processes, and also that interaction between that and Torah content. As an aside, he's also a keen cyclist. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Samuel. Just one other thing to say, if you do have any questions during the presentation, please either send them via the chat, or else Rabbi Landau will try and will answer them at the end of his presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for logging into tonight's session. Thank you to Mum for introducing me. I think that as the executive director, what's your title in the shul? Executive something of the shul and everything. I think for tonight, I would decided to call you the Grand Matriarch. So thank you to the Grand Matriarch for introducing me this evening and for tonight's session. I want to just jump straight in to the plan for tonight. So hopefully you can see my screen, and tonight we are going to have hopefully quite a fun and interactive workshop, blended living, surviving and thriving in this current time. So can you all see my screen? Is that okay?
Yeah?
Great. A little bit of Zoom etiquette. We are going to be having an interactive session. So when we are interacting with each other, please do unmute and engage. In between times, though, if you don't mind muting, or my lovely assistant Elliot will be muting you at those times. So what are we going to cover tonight? What we're going to cover tonight is, first of all, setting the stage for, I think, why this presentation could be helpful and maybe necessary, what is going on for many of us at this time of lockdown, and all the different blended parts of our lives that happen to have made a chulent pot of where we are at this moment. Then we're going to be taking some perspectives and actually trying to think about what it's like from different perspectives to unpack what's happening for the different players that might be part of this blend. I also find it funny talking about blends because, you know, my father's a single malt whiskey connoisseur, so having a blend is obviously something quite heretical, but in any case, we're going to try and take some perspective on this blend and sort of think about it from those multiple perspectives. Then we're going to do some theory, some practice, and take some questions at the end. And if you do have any questions that you want answered, you can always pop them into the chat, and either you can make a private message to the Grand Matriarch, who will be moderating this evening's session, or you can just pop it into the chat and I'll try and pick it up as well. But it's difficult to see the chat when I'm screen sharing, just so you know. Otherwise, you can always pop the space bar and just pop in. Okay, so setting the stage for tonight. Where are we right now? What's going on? So I don't know about you, but a typical day for me starts off sometimes with this. Okay, so it starts off with this. This thing wakes up very, very early. Now, we have a competition every morning who's going to wake up first. Often I do get up before him so I can have a little bit of time to do the duff before the day starts. But then often halfway through my chavrasa, little thing wakes up, and already the blend has begun, because now I'm not only sort of learning, I'm also a father. Then this one wakes up too. Then I'm also breakfast provider. Then there's prayers, so I'm also sort of like a devotee to God. Then whilst these two are sort of getting down to their lessons, and of course the most exciting thing that this one likes to do when it comes to Zoom lessons, has anyone ever seen the filters on Zoom? I just need to stop my share for a second, because this is the most exciting thing about Zoom lessons, is that when you sit this child in front of the computer, they can do something like this. It's amazing. Or that, right? And actually it's almost irrelevant to be thinking about the different classes that this child is going to be having when you can make Zoom do amazing things whilst the teacher is talking. Look, Dad, look, I'm in a TV. Look, it's unbelievable. How can anyone expect to learn when you can put lights over the ceiling? So in any case, this is basically what I do for part of the morning, is that I'm trying to manage this child's learning whilst she's busy putting halos over her head. In the meantime, whilst we're sort of engaged with that, the phone rings, and it's a client. Oh, it's my boss. And they're asking me to do something whilst my child is tugging at my sleeve, and this one needs a nappy change. We go through the day, and it carries on like that more and more and more as the different demands carry on. And I realize that it's already 5 p.m. The children haven't eaten. They haven't learned anything. Avi, I like the bunny rabbit. And at the same time, I'm about 4 hours behind on any sort of work I was meant to be doing today. By the time we get to 9 p.m., I also realized I haven't spoken to my wife other than to bark commands at each other and orders like nappy, work, inbox. And, you know, it gets even worse after maybe there's a bereavement in the community. And then finally, sort of you haul yourself into bed wondering on what on earth was accomplished today, other than raised tempers, frustrated children, and no work really being done. So I thought we'd set this, that was setting the stage. So with all this busyness and insanity that we have, and of course, I know that I'm talking to a particular demographic tonight, but that doesn't exclude others for whom lockdown is an entirely different experience. Lockdown might be an experience of loneliness. It might be an experience of isolation, of not being able to be with children or grandchildren. And then there's a whole different range of tricks or difficulties that come with that. But tonight I really wanted to focus a little bit more on the that blend that we have. So what I thought we would do is just to settle things down for the rest of the session, have a 3-minute breathing space. So this is coming from this book over here, which is Mindfulness: Finding Peace in a Frantic World by Mark Williams and Danny Penman. And I just want us to do a very brief meditation just to set the stage. So I'm going to invite you, if you would like to close your eyes. I'm going to stop the share for a second. If you don't feel like closing your eyes, you can just like look away from the screen. The screen's not necessarily going to be helpful right here. If you want to close your eyes, you want to put your gaze to the floor and deliberately adopt an erect and dignified posture, whether sitting or standing. If possible, close your eyes. Then bring your awareness to your inner experience and acknowledge it, asking, what is my experience right now? What thoughts are going through the mind? As best you can, acknowledge thoughts as mental events. What feelings are here? Turn towards any sense of discomfort or unpleasant feelings, acknowledging them without trying to make them different from how you find them. What body sensations are here right now? Perhaps quickly scan the body to pick up any sensations of tightness or bracing, acknowledging the sensations, but once again, not trying to change them in any way. What's here right now? Now, redirecting the attention to a narrow spotlight on the physical sensations of the breath. Move in close to the physical sensations of the breath in the abdomen, expanding as the breath comes in and falling back as the breath goes out. Follow the breath all the way in and all the way out. Use each breath as an opportunity to anchor yourself into the present. And if the mind wanders, gently escort the attention back to the breath. Now expand the field of awareness around the breathing so that it includes a sense of the body as a whole, your posture and facial expression, as if the whole body was breathing. If you become aware of any sensations of discomfort or tension, feel free to bring your focus of attention right into the intensity by imagining that the breath could move into and around the sensations. In this, you are helping to explore the sensations, befriending them rather than trying to change them in any way. If they stop pulling for your attention, return to sitting aware of the whole body, moment by moment. That's just a little moment to bring us back to this moment, because so often we can be busy in all different sorts of places. I always find Zoom very, very difficult because there's so many different distractions in all the other tabs on the computer. And so the breath is an anchor that we can return to at all times. It's always here. We're always breathing. We can just bring our attention back into this moment, back into this breath, and pause. And so now that we've set the stage for the challenge of blended living, let's take some perspective. In other words, wearing someone else's pants. And what I'm going to invite us to do is to have a little look at the different perspectives I'd like us to think about right now. Oh gosh, like to think us about together. And let's just start from maybe from the perspective of parent or grandparent. So there are going to be two questions that I want to ask each of the people in the multiple circles or networks on this slide. And essentially, what we're sort of engaging in is what you might call from a systemic perspective, or from a that sort of line of thinking in terms of family therapy. We're engaging in circular questioning. We're looking at something from around the circle, taking perspectives from around the different players in the group. So not only are we sort of thinking about our own perspective, but we're going to try and take multiple perspectives on this situation. And by occupying those multiple perspectives, hopefully open up to some of the challenges and strengths that the others in this group, or others other than ourselves, are manifesting. So the two questions I want to ask the parent and grandparent, or ask each person in turn. The first question is, what is the greatest challenge that you are facing? And what is the hope that you have for this situation? So what is the greatest challenge and the hope that you have? So anyone who wants to occupy the parent or grandparent perspective, please feel free to unmute to answer A, what's the greatest challenge? B, what's your greatest hope?
Oh, well, I'll start. My greatest hope is that I can have a Yontiv again with my family.
Okay. The grandparent who'd like to have another Yontiv with their family. The grand matriarch does not want to have another Pesach, right? No one thought last Pesach that we'd have another Pesach without families all together. And it looks like probably that's what's going to happen this year. So that's a hope, is we're going to have a Yontiv again all together. Challenges, hopes, parent or grandparent.
Keeping our children happy.
Okay, so the greatest, is that the challenge or the hope?
Both.
That's right. Okay, so as a parent or grandparent, the greatest challenge is keeping the kids happy. You know, it's interesting, some of the parents I'm speaking to at the moment, it's not necessarily about the children's happiness, it's about their scholastic achievement. And I think that that's become quite a fractious point for many people, is what do we prioritize? We prioritize making sure they attend every single lesson, that they are kind of doing every single worksheet, no matter how much distress it causes them to be forced to sit in front of this screen every single day for hours on end. Or do we prioritize their mental health, and we sort of allow the scholastic stuff to possibly fall by the wayside for the moment, in the hope that they'll catch that up? It's probably easier to catch up scholastic achievement than to rebuild a person's broken sense of self. That's clearly a bias from my perspective on that one, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So yeah, a challenge and a hope is keeping our children happy. Anyone else? One more, parent or grandparent?
Can I just chime in on what you just said, which is that also if the children get too far behind, that will also cause them great distress later, whether it's soon or much later. So there's a limit to how much you can just let them do what they want to do. So that challenge is that the balance, I think, is the challenge for us.
That's great, Avi. Thank you. Avi, do I remember correctly that one of you is a teacher?
One of me is a teacher, yes.
That's right. Okay, fine. No, I'm hearing a teacher there. That's great.
No, that's Natalie.
That's Natalie. That's right. So,
but she does keep me abreast of the development.
No, it's good. And that's a really important. And we're going to put the teacher's perspective in there as well. And I think as a parent who also has a teacher sensitivity, I think that that's also something that you don't want to see your child be that struggling child. You don't want to see them being that one in the classroom who's always having to catch up, always having to take an out, giving that extra time. How long is everyone going to have to play catch up for? What would it mean if the whole class is playing catch up and then playing catch up at different speeds? Yeah, great. Okay, so we've done the parent position, but rather than jumping into the young person one, I want to jump on the other side of the axis. So thinking about the employer position. There might be some employers here, there might be some employees, there might be some people who are self-employed. So it doesn't have to be necessarily simply the employer-employee relationship, but let's just think about a person in the workplace as an employer or someone who's trying to manage a business during this time. What's the greatest challenge and what's the greatest hope?
I suppose as an employer or an owner of a business is the challenge of keeping your business going through all this to the levels which you've always become sort of accustomed and used to. And the hope is that you'll get through it and still have a business and still make some money.
Right. And productivity, even if you're one of the fortunate ones who still has a business at the moment, or is still employed, because so many people have been furloughed or lost their jobs. Redundancy packages have been coming through. I know in our school there's been a significant hardship from many people for whom business has just imploded. They were doing, they were in the prime of their business. They were, some people in their 50s experiencing good success and continued success. And then all of a sudden events are gone. All of a sudden the theatre industry is gone. All of a sudden certain industries are just, there's nothing there. And you never expected to have to worry about where food was going to come from, where the mortgage payments were going to come from, and productivity is gone. But even if you're in the fortunate position of having a business, what state is that business going to be in? Yeah. Anyone else?
I've got something.
Sure, I can't see who you are. Yeah, Janet.
I think part of the challenge is if you're self-employed or you're working from home, a mixture between self-employed and working from home, is that there's something about being very boundaried, the work-home life balance. Listen, I'm at a Zoom meeting, I'm wearing my pajamas. Thanks to Roz, these are Roz's pajamas, Busty said. So I'm merging all my days just so it merge into one, actually. So, but no, I'm being somewhat facetious. But there is something about putting down boundaries, and I think it is quite challenging working from home. While they've got advantages not commuting, I think you need to be quite boundaried. The work-life balance can get merged into one. And I think the downside of that is, when you do go back to work, if you go to an actual workplace, I think, you just might have been burnt out. You just might be exhausted. And I think it's really, I think self-care is terribly important and get lost.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. And that's, so, I mean, who has worn trousers for the past year? Let's be honest. We're talking about wearing someone else's pants on the slide.
Exactly.
The Grand Matriarch doesn't like these jokes. Anyway, so the point is I can watch your face, Grand Matriarch. So the point is that I think that, your work-life balance is funny. I was speaking to someone who heads up a whole group of businesses, and they've been thinking about employee productivity, because I think in the past we all had this sort of illusion that if we could just work from home, it'd be amazing. We'd save 2 hours on the commute, we'd save so much money on the tube and the train, everything would be so much easier. We'd all be able to work from home very well. And possibly that is the case if there aren't other things running around at home. But even if there are not other things running around at home, it is quite sort of demarcated that this is my work time and this is not my work time. And I found myself picking up emails at all sorts of hours of the day. Now, a rabbi never has any boundaries in his life, but I see it in so many other people, that people are burning out, not necessarily because of the volume of the work, but actually because the work is dispersed so much throughout the day. There doesn't seem to be any demarcation between what is on time and what's an off time. And for an employer, that might also be a challenge, that on the one hand, they're trying to keep their business going, like Elliot was saying before, but on the other hand, they're feeling that their employees don't have the ability to to continue that energy because of the situation. And there was a recent, I think a couple of days ago in the news, there was some boss of a big company that was that stepped down for mentioning something about employees being snowflakes during this time. And I think there is a real sense, maybe from an employer's perspective, like, can we get on with this? You've got so much time at home, seemingly, but it's not being used productively. So I think productivity and boundaries, that's really interesting. Okay, so we've done the parent perspective a little bit, we've done the employer perspective a little bit. Let's do, I think Avi already introduced us to the teacher perspective a bit, but let's think from a teacher perspective, because I think that that's another pressure in this system, particularly those with young children or with grandchildren who are support or part of a support bubble of young children. What's the teacher perspective? What's the greatest challenges and what's the greatest hope?
Well, you already highlighted the issue of using Zoom and technology to try and keep a child focused. And that in itself, particularly if they're not used to using technology, can be very challenging.
So once again, so the challenge for the teacher is to teach in a medium that they're entirely unused to. That no teachers normally work in that sort of quantum space of interpersonal interaction with their class, not just with a screen. So they're having to learn to teach in a way that is entirely different. That's a challenge. That's a great challenge.
That's right.
And I am, if we don't have other teachers on, maybe I should speak on behalf of Natalie, obviously what I've seen from her challenge, if that's okay.
Sure.
So before she went on to give lessons via actually Google Classroom or over the internet, she and her colleagues were extremely worried. She had many sleepless nights. They spent a lot of time preparing. But now that she's used to it, she's actually quite happy with some aspects. So some ways, actually, it's quite good. The worst thing is a very noisy classroom. Well, there's no such thing as a noisy classroom over the internet. You just mute people if there's a problem. So now she's scared to go back in the classroom.
Okay. So the challenge is going back. Yeah, I never thought as a rabbi I'd be able to just keep everyone quiet for the full duration of anything I say, because you can just mute people. I suppose that the danger of muting a child is that when do they get to then, how do you get their attention again? You've just turned them off, but you haven't brought them back. But yeah, I think it's this blend of how getting used to a certain medium and then having to flip between one medium and the other. At the moment, our daughter is having partial key worker provision and partial not key worker provision because the school has limited ability to offer key worker provision. So she's going from person to person teaching to computer teaching twice throughout the week. So I think that if that's difficult for her, I'm sure it's also difficult for the teachers as well. Anything else from a teacher perspective, what we could imagine teachers are finding as their greatest challenge or their greatest hope?
It strikes me that teachers have well, it's very difficult for them to assess how their kids are doing. So they're wondering whether they're succeeding or failing, whether their kids, particularly those kids who are at critical stages of their education, starting secondary school, in the first year of secondary school, GCSEs, A-levels. Am I fouling up these kids' lives, or am I actually succeeding in getting them to where they want to be?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Lovely to see you, by the way. So, part of the teaching relationship, part of teaching is imparting information, for sure, and giving an education. And I think as time has progressed, I've seen the teaching profession, it sounds like I'm very old, but I'm not, obviously, but you've seen the teaching profession move more and more into that sort of service provider mentality. We are just imparting an education. Here is the disc. I am now downloading the disc into child's brain, job done. But of course, teaching is not that. Teaching is also about nurturing people. And so that's the relationship part, which is, I think, also very much challenged here. So that will be a challenge on there too. So maybe I hope that we can regain that in the future. We've got 2 more perspectives to do, and we've got the young person as well. And I just want to stop the share for a second so we can have a bit more screen time together. So from the young person's perspective, from a child experiencing lockdown, so what is the greatest challenge and what is the greatest hope? So either you'd have seen it with your children, your friends' children, with your grandchildren.
Social interaction.
Oh, sorry, my wife wants to say
No,
something.
you can say it. I was going to say loneliness and
Yep.
the lack of social interaction.
Right. So one of these challenges is that kids need to play with each other.
Yeah.
Adults, we're all social beings, right? We're humans, so we're all social beings. But somehow adults can manage some sort of semblance of social interaction, maybe through other forms. But kids just need to go and have a run around and play with each other and push each other over, and they don't get to do that. So yeah, a challenge of social interaction. Anyone else?
Sorry, hi.
Hi, Sean.
Sean just turned off the video because he's got the TV on. Anyway, so I just wanted to say, I mean, the continuous screen time is just horrendous. I don't know how we're ever going to change that with our kids.
Yep. It's almost like either it's an addiction or it's an absolute turn off. So either they just can't let go of the screen, or the screen seems to be something which is, it's just the worst thing that they could look at. Yeah, it's a real tricky one. And of course, it's for many people, it's just, that is the only way out of this situation. How do you manage all the different competing demands without any support, without any playtime, without any outlets for these kids? So then you do put them in front of a screen, but then that's
there are lots of problems with that.
Michelle?
There are a lot of problems with that. Yes, can you hear me?
I can
there are a
hear
lot
you,
of problems.
Michelle. Yeah.
Says, you're so sweet. With online bullying, actually.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems with online bullying. I've got grandchildren in this country who fortunately are involved in the Haredi system, so there doesn't seem to be so much. But I do know from my grandchildren in Israel that there is online bullying, particularly with the older girls, once they get past the age of 8, because they don't seem to feel, when they're on WhatsApp or they're on another platform, they don't see people's faces, they don't see their reactions. And so it's unfettered, actually, and very worrying.
Yes,
I've spoken to a lot of people about this.
Sort of slip in. Thank you, Michelle. It's something that just can slip in. So one of the challenges for children is how to use technology safely. And the more that technology seems to permeate all different parts of our life, including education, so the more that needs to be thought of and calculated. Even, sometimes I might show my kids a Purim music video on YouTube. And then on YouTube, if you don't buy the subscription, so then they have adverts in between each video, right? So all of a sudden, there's an advert of a semi-naked person trying to sell a course how to be the most alpha male. All of a sudden, my 7-year-old, she's not even 7 yet, is seeing an advert for that, and you didn't expect that after a Purim video on YouTube. So and all sorts of different things can happen on an unfiltered phone, or a phone when you're not, or an internet connection when you're not near them and taking care of it. So that's a definite challenge. Okay, so we talked about loneliness. We've talked about interactions online. Any hopes that children are going to be having for the future? Get into their shoes a little bit.
Hope to see their friends again in person.
Yeah. Amanda.
Hello.
Yeah.
I may just say something. I think that actually, even for us, I think there's a lot of negative things. But I think actually for them, when I think about like the future, like 50 years from now, and they're going to be talking about, lockdown and those experiences of just being at home with their mum and dad and all the different activities, because it is a bit different. So I hope that in the future, when we all can look back at this time, we can remember it focusing on the positive things and how it helped us rather than all the negative things that we're feeling.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that is a voice that hasn't been sort of recognized so far this evening, is the positive sides of lockdown. So as a personal example, I've got to spend much more time with this thing. My little boy, he's not little, he's 2. Avi, I'm loving the hat. So I've got to have hours with him, which I would never have had the schedule been normal. And we bake together in the morning, we dance in the kitchen, we listen to music, we talk, we read, we daven together. So these are experiences which we would have never had lockdown not been here. So I think there are opportunities also that have been that have come about through this, which are not negative at all, which are actually quite beautiful. And final part for this sort of perspective taking, and this is sort of like the rabbinic part and the Jewish part coming in a little bit to complement the psychological part, is if we put God in the center of that circle, and just to bring back that slide one more time, if we put God in the center of that circle, and maybe this is a funny perspective to take, and I just thought, let's see what we can do with that, which is, what do you think God's greatest challenge is in the pandemic? Yeah, I know he brought it, and I know he's running the show, but what's his greatest challenge, and what's his greatest hope for us? If the big G.
Plenty of time.
Well,
People keeping us connected to him whilst trying to figure out what's going on.
Is that the challenge or the hope?
The challenge, and I guess the hope as well, that people will stay connected to and have faith.
Yeah. Thanks, Elliot. Martin, you about to say something?
Well, if God believes in the United Synagogue, I think he would be very, very worried, because I think a lot of people not on the peripheries, near the centre actually, but slightly off the centre, will be thinking to themselves, actually, I really enjoy my 3-mile walk on a Shabbat morning. Forget about going to shul. I'm going to commune. I'm going to commune with my own thoughts and with God perhaps, but I won't be going to shul anymore, or I'll be going to shul that less often.
Right. So one of God's challenges is how to re-engage with disaffected members who might be doing all sorts of different things on a Shabbat morning now that shul is closed. We won't talk about the United Synagogue too much because we don't talk shop. But yeah, I think for many people of any faith, they are finding the closure of places of communal worship and that part of their schedule to be at times liberating, and not just that they're missing it. So God's going to have a challenge to re-engage us with him.
Just to flip that though,
yeah,
just to be really controversial, which I never am.
Go on, Elliot.
But Martin, you made a very valid point there. But maybe God is trying to, maybe his hope is that people realize that they don't need to go to shul to connect with God. They can do it anywhere on their 3-mile walk.
What's his point?
Yeah, but like
so
people are saying,
maybe God's hope therefore is for us to more broadly be able to call out to him at our time of need, wherever we are, whenever we are, and have that relationship.
Yes, and for it to be more meaningful, as opposed to just turning up at shul thinking, I've turned up at shul, I'm going to do my bit, and therefore I've done my bit in terms of connecting with Hashem. But actually, their mind and focus isn't there. Whereas right. If they're by themselves, away from shul, and in their own way connecting with Hashem, it's in a more meaningful way. Because sometimes people need that as opposed to be seen to just going somewhere to daven. And they're not really davening, they're just doing what they think people want to see them do.
Yeah. Thank you, Elliot. And maybe I'll just add before we move on to the next slide and move on to the next part of the presentation is maybe God wants us to see how we can manage adversity and grow to become the best people we can be with this challenge. I don't know. Elliot, I've got a little bit of sound in the background if you don't mind just managing that. Thank you. Okay, so that was our perspective taking. That was our circular thinking and chair work. And I'm hoping that that's just opened up some different ways of thinking around the different challenges and different hopes that people will be having over this blended time of living. So a little bit of theory for this evening. I want to talk about how we understand what distress and stress does to us and does to our mental health. I want to talk a little bit about attachment, which is a very powerful theory of supporting children in their basic and most fundamental of relationships. And then I want to do a little bit of Jewish thinking as well about how we respond to tests and contextualizing challenges within a broader sort of Jewish framework. So I'm hoping to wear both hats this evening in terms of the psychologist and rabbi. So let's dive into why are we struggling at the moment? Because we are normal. So what I want to introduce you to is a very fundamental and basic theory within the world of mental health and psychology, which is why does anyone become, say, mentally unwell? Now, mentally unwell sounds very serious, but intensely low in mood, quite anxious and stressed out. You know, it used to be you would walk down the road and you'd see a little child walking towards you and you think, oh, cute, like the child is walking towards me. That's a wonderful thing. And you say hello, and the child would say hello, and it was all very cute, and they'd walk around with a smile and you'll walk away with a smile, and that was the end of the interaction. Now you see a child walking along the street towards you and you think, super spreader. They're not even wearing a mask, right? And you run you just jump out. It's almost like, you know, you put yourself at risk. You'd rather be run over by a car than by come next to a 5-year-old child. So, you know, we are experiencing quite a great deal of distress at the moment. And why? Well, how does distress affect us? How does it affect our mental health? So the vulnerability stress model is essentially saying that we have 2 different components that contribute to our mental well-being. The first is inherent vulnerabilities. Those are vulnerabilities that either just they were the luck of the draw, that was what genetics gave us, or what our early environments contributed to our brain development and physical development, or a sort of an interaction between the two. So we all have a certain threshold of vulnerability, and then that vulnerability is matched with life events, and we could, or with stress. And we could think about stress in 2 different ways. We could think about base stress levels, and that's the basic, the bottom part of the graph, which is sort of just the general stress that's knocking around in society. And then we can talk about stressful experiences. So those are stressful events in life. So let's imagine that right now, the base stress level, at least let's say December, January, was just rising exponentially. The numbers of people who are catching COVID, who are passing away from COVID, the numbers were just getting more and more and more. It was scary, you know, for a population of our size. We were doing possibly one of the worst in the world in terms of our COVID experience and the mortality that was happening in this country. The stress in the country was absolutely palpable. So the base stress level is going up. Then you've got our own sort of personal stressful experiences, difficult conversations with employers, children who are kicking off because they are not managing the situation right now, personal bereavements because someone we know has died of COVID, or a person's relative, a friend. So there's all these bereavements knocking around. And so no matter how many resources we have, and these are resources, we'll get there in a second, we will be pushed over our personal limit. Will be pushed over the point whereby the vulnerability combined with the base stress and the personal and the stressful experiences just push us beyond our limit. And once we get beyond our limit, that's when the distress starts to be experienced in a sort of a ordinary coping fashion, and it starts to become experienced in a less helpful, more challenging fashion. So you might have panic attacks, meltdowns, just a background of general distress that impairs our ability to function. And really, I think from a psychological perspective or a clinical perspective, for want of a better word, that's when we start to think that things are really starting to become tricky, is when life is impaired. Ordinary activities of living are now substantively impaired because of the distress that we're feeling. Now, we've all got resources also that kind of push our level a little bit higher, such as therapy, friends, stable living situations, and some of those have also been taken away by lockdown because friends have become impaired, stable living situations might become impaired. So again, so that some of the resources that we had, which would raise our personal threshold, may have become impaired too. So why are we struggling? Because we're normal, because everyone's stress level is up here. Everyone's experiencing many more stressful experiences than they would normally do, or many people are. And resources are also quite difficult to access. So put all that together and you have a very ripe set of ingredients for people to be experiencing distress in a way that impairs their ability to live their lives as they would want. So if we want to then manage this, one of the things that we can just notice is start to think about, well, so how much stress is there and what can I do? What can I do to sort of start to pick away at some of that stress? I'll do more of that in the practical part of the session, but as now we've got the theory here, now we understand why some of the practical parts will be attempting to push that aside. Okay, next little piece of theory is just to share with you something about attachment. Now, attachment is a well, in psychology, it's a well-known theory, but maybe outside of psychology, it's less well-known, and outside of, say, the teaching profession, it's less well-known. But attachment is a theory by Bowlby and Ainsworth. Bowlby's, I call it here, Bowlby's silver spoon. Essentially, if you have a securely attached child, what is attachment? So attachment is the idea that you have a a single caregiver who is in tune to a child. So if you just look at this picture over here, I pulled it out of my presentation program. It gives you, like, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It gives you a beautiful demonstration of attunement between caregiver and child, that the child feels like they're being understood by the caregiver. They're communicating something. The caregiver is down on the level of the child. They are responding to the child's needs. And what does this child feel when caregiver is giving them that attention and that sort of absorption and safe base? They feel that they can actually explore the world. The world is something that, even though it might have unpredictabilities, it's safe enough to go out and engage with the world because I know I've got something to fall back on. I've got that safety net of love and support and help. And so attachment is the child that knows that is securely attached to the caregiver. And it doesn't require both parents to be that person or both caregivers. It requires one, and doesn't even need to be a parent. It could be a grandparent, it could be a friend, it could be an uncle or an auntie. It just needs one person in that child's life who they know they can fall back on, and they can have therefore a secure attachment. And attachment works in other relationships too, so that's why I put up a romantic relationship over here as well. That if we can trust the people that are around us, we can trust that we've got our safety net there, then the benefits are astounding. So a securely attached child has amazing correlations with future success in relationships, future success in terms of employment, future success in terms of social capital. There are all sorts of positive correlations that come about from the securely attached child and future life events. And so what's the risk at the moment? The risk at the moment possibly is that with less people in the child system, and the people in the child system being more stressed, more pressured, and therefore less full of their own resource to give to that young person, that attachment relationships can be put to the test, can be under strain. So when father, for example, doesn't just have to be father, but also has to be employee and teacher and homemaker all at the same time, whilst also trying to be parent. So the parent part might suffer, let's say, in favor of in favor of the teacher role. You know, Avi and I had a conversation about that before. But if parent suffers, so can child still attach to caregiver? Does child still feel they've got caregiver on their side? And I don't think we have to pit teacher role versus parent role always at odds with each other, but I just want to speak out the risk of this very stressed out individual not necessarily being able to always be there in that attuned way to their child. And I'm not saying that so it always sounds like a constant thing. I'll talk about that in a second. But the risk is that as families, we might be so under stress that we can't give our kids this very, very important attachment relationship. Whilst we were talking about attachment, I just wanted to make a side point, which is dvekus, which is the Hebrew word for attachment, as translated by Aryeh Kaplan, is dvekus. Now, dvekus or dvekut often is translated in a very archaic fashion. It's called cleaving to God. You cleave to God, you adhere to God. But if you want to know sort of what Aryeh Kaplan translates that as, he translates that as attachment. If you want to know what the archetype of a productive and healthy relationship with God is, it's just feeling attached to him. It's feeling like God's got your back, that you've got God to rely on, that he's your safety net, that he's looking in your eyes and attuned to you. So if you want to, so you know, thinking about our own needs and our own sort of mental health, if we can have our own safety net with God behind us, then that might give us the support that we need to then give that safety net to the child too. And a caveat that I would say at this point in time is, first of all, that the chief rabbi, previous emeritus chief rabbi, may he rest in peace, and his memory should be a blessing, Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. I heard him speak in Israel when I was in yeshiva about 14 years ago, and he was talking to a group of English seminary and yeshiva students, and they were asking him a number of questions. And one of the students spoke about how much outreach they should be doing on campus. And he said something that I say over many, many times. He said, in his very sort of serious and direct and very sort of an amazing fashion with huge gravitas, he said, it says when you are going on an aeroplane, But apparently we used to go on airplanes back in the day. Anyway, it says when you go on an airplane and you're having the safety briefing, they say to you, if there's a drop in cabin pressure, oxygen masks will fall from the panel in front of you. Before trying to help someone else put on their mask, make sure your mask is safely fastened. Essentially, you know, for this person going out onto campus and wondering how much outreach they should be doing for other students, make sure that you're strong in your Judaism before you give that Judaism to others. But that analog here would be, we all need to look after ourselves. There's no point having a suffocating parent desperately trying to give oxygen to their child if the parent is going to fall apart as a result. Take the time that we need to nourish ourselves so that then we can, and it's not selfish, it's entirely in the service of the child, so that then we can offer them that attunement that they desperately need. And the other thing is just to think about the idea of what it means to be a parent, a good parent. It doesn't mean to be a perfect parent. It means to be a good enough parent. Good enough really is good enough. Not every time the child calls do we need to be present. Rather, they need to know that most of the time we have their backs, but that no one can always be there all of the time. Okay, so that's another little bit of theory to chuck into the mix, and a little bit of Jewish theory too, which is thinking about tests and challenges in life, nisayon for want of a better word. So what do we as Jews think about challenges and tests? And we talked about God's perspective on what's going on for many of us in lockdown. Well, what would God want from us? And I sort of alluded to that before. The question is asked about Abraham. Abraham is given possibly the greatest test any of us could experience. It's not an easy test to talk about. It's not politically correct test to talk about. He's asked to go up the mountain asked to go up Mount Moriah and sacrifice his son. And God calls out to Abraham and he says, Hineni, here I am. And Isaac calls out to Abraham. He says, Avi, he says, Dad. And Abraham says, Hineni, Beni, here I am, my son. And Abraham is able seemingly to say Hineni to his maker and Hineni to his son, and hold both of those relationships in mind and heart at the same time. Somehow he's able to hold loyalty to his Father in heaven as well as to his son on earth. An unbelievable test for anyone to hold on to. But you could have just asked, like, what was the point? If God knew that Abraham could do this, if God knew that Abraham was going to be able to be pulled apart and still stay whole, why put him through that experience? Why give him the test in the first place? And an answer that is often given, and I think it's a powerful one, is that a nisayon, a test, is something which is not for God, it's for us. That when we are in crisis, it either brings out the worst in us or it can bring out the best in us. It can help us find places of strength and fortitude that we never knew we had. And we would never have been able to demonstrate that and bring that potential out into the real world and manifest it without this opportunity. And so while it's not easy to say something to a person who's experiencing difficulty and distress and to say to them, this could be an opportunity, it could even sound invalidating, there might be an opportunity here to bring out the best in us, to bring out the best strengths, creativity and wisdom that we hold within ourselves to manage this situation, to make a success of Corona, rather than just to simply leave it behind as a blip. I often get stuck on this idea, we're desperate to go back to normal. Well, I don't know when that's going to be, but what about making this day the best day it can be, and tomorrow the best day it can be, and then actually having a string of best days that can possibly be, so that we look back on this time, and not that we welcome the test. Every day in davening we say, "V'lo day nisayon," don't altavieni, don't bring us to a challenge. We don't welcome the challenges, but when they're here, let's rise to the occasion, let's take them on, and let's see what we can build. So a little bit of practice, a little bit of practical tools now to manage, to take that theory and to filter it through into some practical tools. And that's going to take us through till about 9:30, and then we'll have some time for questions. So just to jump straight in. First practical tool that I've actually been sharing with a number of my patients and congregants. Basically, I can't stop telling people to stop. And here's a quote from Viktor Frankl, which I think is a beautiful quote. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. That means between A, which is the input, and C, which is the output, stimulus and response, there's a space. There's a space in the middle over here. And we're often not aware of it. But in that space lies our freedom to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. We often think input comes in, output comes out. But there is, if we can just become aware of the processing that happens, right? We often think it's like a knee-jerk reaction. The doctor, the grand matriarch, hits the knee, and there's an involuntary knee-jerk reflex, right? The child does something with the computer, or there's a ping into the inbox, whatever it is, and automatically there's a cascade, seemingly, of thoughts, emotions, of actions. But if we actually can separate out the space in between the input and the output, there's a space for choice, and therefore our growth and freedom. So the tool is stop, S-T-O-P-P. As the input comes in, stop. Just pause for a moment. T. Take a breath. Notice your breathing as you breathe in and out. That breath can save lives. It can save a moment. It can save marriages. It can save relations. It can save families. Just slow down with the breath. Sometimes people take a step back. Take a step back. Also physically, just to gain perspective on the situation. When you've taken that breath, you've taken that pause. Now, observe. Just look around. It's like that mindful moment we had before. What thoughts are here? What feelings are here? What body sensations are here? What's drawing my attention? Just describing the details of this moment. It grounds me in this present moment, and it gives me a bit of objectivity on the situation. Now, P, pull back. Get a perspective. A thought is just a thought. It's not reality. What's the bigger picture? Take the helicopter perspective, almost as if I'm looking down on this situation. I'm just wondering, I'm looking, I'm watching what's happening. You know, it's like a camera in the corner of the room looking down. Can I get perspective on what's happening? What's really important here? What's less important? Let's just have an opportunity to balance what works. And then the second P, practice what works and proceed. Let's make a choice. What's the best thing to do right now? What can I do that fits with my values and my family's values? What's going to be effective anyway and appropriate, spelled incorrectly? What's going to be appropriate? What's going to be something that would actually work? And it can even be pragmatic. And maybe a little prayer as well, that with a little bit of God's help, we can make the most of this challenge. And I was going to do a little 3-minute prayer right now, but I don't think we have time. So maybe we'll just come back to that at the end if there is time. But there's just there are times that we can just speak, as Elliot sort of said, and Martin were discussing, we can just offer up a little prayer. Just please help. Let's just get through the next hour, God. Let's just get through the next hour and make it work for everyone. And then I dip back and I can choose possibly a wiser and more helpful response to that situation. Let's stop. Then once stop has happened, a few little tips that we could use just to move things along with accepts and improves. And we'll just run through these very quickly because these can be found on other slideshows online and other also skills online. These are, by the way, these are skills from DBT, from dialectical behavioral therapy, really a very helpful therapy in different ways, but also very practical. So accepts is to distract with how can we just move our things, move our children on, move ourselves on, move our partners on, move our employers on, move people on. So A, to distract with activities. There might be something else, just let's get on with something else right now. Let's do some arts and crafts. Let's do some painting. Let's do some poetry. Let's have a conversation. Let's go for a walk. Distract with contributing. One of the best things that we can do to fill ourselves up is also to give to others. Now, giving to others doesn't have to be depleting. Often giving to others can be incredibly nourishing. It can be so wonderful to see how a phone call to another member of the community, to a family member who might be lonely, it can just lift us because we have lifted them. C, comparisons. Some people find this one a bit invalidating. Other people find this really helpful. So the Grand Matriarch's mother and father are Holocaust survivors. Their youth was spent in Auschwitz-Birkenau and other camps of Nazi Germany. So I could start thinking about my own suffering, and that's fine, and I'm allowed to do that. But I can also think, what's my suffering compared to theirs? You know, if on a scale of, if we had a Grand Richter scale of suffering, so grandma and grandpa had it much harder than I did, sitting here in my house with internet, with family, like what, you know, with food, that they had it. So let's just get a little bit of perspective on the suffering. Some people find that very invalidating. Some people find that very liberating. So take that one with a pinch of salt. To distract with emotions. Sometimes it's nice just to use a different emotion to displace the current one I'm feeling. Something like that can be as easy, and I do this quite a lot at the moment. I did an assembly for Wolves and Hillel on Friday, and it was all about happiness, because Misha Nichnas Adar, Marbin Besimcha, when Adar comes in, so increase your happiness. And all I did for the first minute, and now this sounds a bit crazy, is well, I looked at the camera and I laughed a deep, big belly laugh until 70 children were laughing hysterically with me, because you can't but help laugh when someone else is doing something crazy like that. And so you can watch a Mr. Bean movie, you can do big crazy belly laughs, you can put on a Zoom hat, whatever it is. Thanks, Avi. So you can do all sorts of different things to distract this emotion with another emotion. Some people have got go-to music that they enjoy, and you could have a family distraction as well with another emotion. P, another one which is sort of taken with a pinch of salt, some people like it, some people don't, is to push things away. Sometimes it's just saying, I'm going to pack this in a bag and I'm going to deal with this later. We've got a worry monster at home that we can write our worries on. We can put it into the worry monster's mouth. We seal up the worry monster's mouth, and off we go. And then we can just push away some of these issues. It works temporarily. It doesn't work necessarily long term, but temporarily we can manage that moment. T is for thoughts. So using other thoughts, like a crossword puzzle, or engage in doing some sort of mental arithmetic, doing a comprehension, reading a book, or sensations. Probably the best one for this is just to hold an ice cube. If you can get your kids to hold an ice cube, they're not going to be thinking about anything else other than how cold their hands are. Smelling salts, that's the same idea. Nice taste, a nice any other sensory experience that will distract us from this moment and allow us to move on from that intense emotion. And then if distraction is not what's going to work, maybe we just need to improve the situation, is to bring more positivity into this moment. So IMPROVE, I for imagery. I'm going to run these things a little bit quickly. So I is for imagery, which is to imagine in our minds a safe and happy place. So maybe this is a holiday that we went on once back in the day, where we used to be able to go on holiday, and a special sort of moment on a special holiday that we can just close our eyes and we're transported there. One time I was with my wife in the south of France, and we were looking for a secluded stretch of beach, and we hiked across rock and crag to find this amazing little cove where no one else was there. And I can just close my eyes and I'm in that space, in that couple of hours, or that sunny afternoon with the beautiful blue waters, and my mind is now filled with much greater positivity than it was before. M is for meaning. We've touched on this already in the presentation, which is, what meaning can I find in my suffering right now and in this pain? What meaning can be imputed? Even kids can understand something very positive, like we've got the opportunity to do mitzvahs for other people in the community, to make Purim cards for elderly people in the community, executive directors of the community. It's a good one, right? The kids do cards for the older people, you send them off, they make phone calls afterwards. It's really, really nice. Anyway, what meaning can we find in this time to actually help us to help others? P, pray, speak to Hashem. He's just waiting to be spoken to. R, relax, take some time out, have a bath, have a soak, have a jog, have a bike ride. Call me if you are. O, one thing at a time. The parody that we did at the beginning with all the different things happening all at the same time is a great tool to splitting your head into pieces. So if you can mindfully come back to this moment, ground yourself in that breath, and then separate out, make a list, one thing at a time, and tick it off. V, vacation, take a vacation. Now that doesn't mean going away, because we can't, but what it does mean is maybe just taking an hour's break from life, just going for a walk into the woods, going out to Red Road Park, whatever it is, wandering off into the those fields. Like, it just carries on going back there, right? All the way to Radlett. So just carry on walking and don't stop. Just take a vacation. And then E is encouragement. And this is possibly one of the most powerful ones on the slide as well, which is sit yourself down as if it was your friend faced with the same difficulty, and then give yourself encouragement as you would give a friend. We're often much kinder to other people than we are to us. We can often manifest compassion for other people much more easily than we can for ourselves. So pretend you are your friend and give yourself the encouragement that you deserve. And final one for families and for groups, which is tell your story. Because this is a confusing time for so many people. It's a time with no stability, with constant change. No human being does well with constant unpredictability, uncertainty, and change. So tell your family narrative of what has happened over lockdown. Think Seder night. What does Seder night do? Seder night gives us a language, it gives us a family and a national story to tell of the upheavals that went before us and have continued to beset our people across the generations. B'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, chayav adam l'eretz atzmo ki'ilu hu yatzah mitzrayim, as if he went out from Egypt. In every generation, we have to experience that movement from slavery to freedom, because in every generation there is a challenge. It's not just the generation of the Holocaust or the generation of Russian pogrom or the generation of the massacres of Khmelnytsky or the Crusades. Every generation has its thing, and this is our thing. So let's tell our story. And that could be in a scrapbook, that could be in a family poem, that could be in a video diary, that could be on a blog post that we all work on together. That could be in a collage. There could be something that we use as a family to pin this down. But when we tell our story, we actually make sense of it and we are able to process it. Something they do in narrative therapy, which is the therapy of telling stories essentially, is that they lay out a rope, which is the lifeline. And on that rope, they put rocks down for negative events and flowers for positive events. You know, what's the lifeline of our corona experience as a family? What have been our rocks? What have been our flowers? And then once we find and map that out, what's the preferred story? What's the story that we'd like to have for our family right now? And just a few remembering things to say. Always remember to say, I love you. I don't think you can say it too many times. Remember to say, I'm sorry, because we will make mistakes. And it's okay to say sorry to our kids. It's okay to say sorry to our partners. It's okay to say sorry to our employers. It's okay to say sorry to God. The important thing is that you said, I'm sorry. And also, don't forget to say, I forgot we're on the same team. We're actually all trying to sing from the same hymn sheet. We're trying to go to the same place together. And so a couple of final points. Don't forget there's always someone here to help you. Never worry alone. If you are worried about your or someone else's well-being, talk about it. Don't worry alone. There's nothing quite so isolating and quite so there's nothing quite so bad as the hell of worrying by yourself, essentially. So never worry alone. Pick up the phone. Speak to the Grand Matriarch. She's a retired GP, if you didn't know. Speak to your local mental health professional. Speak to a friend. Speak to your rabbi. Rabbi Garson had to pop off, but he's going to watch the recording. Speak to someone who you trust and who can give you some of their wisdom and support. Don't worry alone. Consult with your GP. That's what they're here for. If you are worried about the health of someone, start with your GP. It's a really good place to start. They are the primary care specialists in the country, so go and have a chat with them, and they can always offer you a referral and some advice about where to go next. Talk to your friends. Another poorly spelled slide. Talk to your friends. We need people. Just make sure that that social contact is there. We just need some encouragement and some love from those around us. There's some great community organizations out there. There's Jamie, there's GIF, there's Relief, there's so many more. And final point is talk to Hashem, because he loves us all. Thank you very much for your attention this evening. I also wanted to say a quick thank you to Barnet Shaw for giving me the time to do this presentation tonight for you, Or Yisrael. And it's a real pleasure to be coming back to Or Yisrael in this guise. I feel like a proper imposter for having given this presentation to you, having had my bar mitzvah in your shul, But this is the time now to offer any questions, thoughts, reflections. Put them in the chat or unmute yourself, and I'd be glad to take them now.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Dr. Samuel Landau, son. It was a very, very comprehensive presentation. I've certainly learned a lot from it. And it'd be lovely, I know it's already late, but if anybody would like to ask anything, please unmute yourselves and fire away to Samuel. I think you've blinded everybody with science, Samuel. One thing I just want to comment on when we were talking about, going right back to the beginning to God, was when you were saying about the challenges and the hopes. And one of the things that I noticed, particularly in the first lockdown, was how everybody took care of their neighbour. Everybody was interested in their neighbour. There was very much a neighbourly spirit. Lockdown finished, and we went back, or seemingly, to our old ways. And I don't think that's been recreated in the second and the third lockdowns. Do you have any comments as why you think that might have happened?
That's a great question. I think that the thing that marked that for me was when the clap stopped, right? So we used to have that amazing moment on a Thursday evening where at 8 p.m. we'd get out on our doorsteps and we'd clap. And I was, it was so interesting here in Barnet, watching all the different families from across the street, people I knew, people I didn't know, just clapping for the NHS, and sort of that great spirit that we could believe in this organization that was somehow going to be holding us and caring for us. And then things started to sour. I'm sure there's lots of different reasons for that. I have my own sort of reflections about the togetherness or lack thereof in our society here in the UK. As you know, I've recently come back from Israel, and I just sort of have, actually not so recently now, it's almost been a year since we've moved back. I have a reflection that I've had a few bike accidents in the recent past. It kind of comes with the territory. When I had an accident in the UK in Radlett on a cold morning, on the high street, literally on the high street, I was lying on the side of the road, clearly in pain, clearly very much injured. I'd actually broken my pelvis, and cars, every single car drove past, not a single car stopped, not a single pedestrian stopped, which was all the more sort of bizarre as I'm lying there on the side of the road. In Israel, I had an accident. Every single car stopped, people pick you up, let me take you to hospital, let me take your bike to hospital. And I think that we do have a different society here, and we're not great yet at not treating others with distrust. And it's a shame. On the other hand, I have a slightly more positive spin on that now, which is that a week and a half ago, I went over some black ice and came off my bike again. It seems to be part of the territory. And I decided to scratch my floor. No, I just decided to scratch my face with the floor, or my floor with the face, whatever. And a car on the other side of the road stopped. And it was on Henderwood Lane, and he stopped and he got out of his car. He said, "Can I offer you a lift?" I looked at his car. It was a smart car, right? There's no way for a bike to fit in the car. It was the smallest car you could possibly get. But actually, I said to him, "Thank you so much for stopping. Thank you so much. It meant so much." And I think that actually now as a society, maybe we are starting to be more loving and welcoming of other people based on my anecdotal experience. But it's something that I think we do have to grapple with as British society. How can we become more integrated? So yeah, that's a good question.
3 points, Samuel. One, actually, when I've been off my motorbike, off my push bike, just like you, I've always found people really, really helpful. People stop, the traffic has stopped. Strangers have offered to help me. It's been really, really, really nice. Never mind cyclists. If you stop for a glass of water, cyclists.
That's the brethren. Okay. Secondly,
I don't think it's all lost. I think, well, certainly in the road that I live in, there's now a WhatsApp group. We now care for each other. Friday night, somebody's alarm went off, and the WhatsApp group.
I think that you're right, Martin. There are lasting lasting points. And actually working in the NHS, that you see it much more, you know, on the front line. You see the love and respect that pours into the hospital too. Go on.
And the third item was, how can we, I know they're available online somewhere, but it'd be very useful if we could access those slides. Could you arrange to send them to your mum so that she can send them to the community, please?
Sure, we can sort that out. Thank you, Martha.
Thanks.
Any other final thoughts or comments or reflections?
It was a great lecture. It was really, really good. I cancelled my learning this evening to hear it, and it was really, really good. Thank you very much, Samuel. Not that I'm your fan, but never mind.
or previous employer.
I think on that note, it's already getting quite late. I really want to thank you very, very much, and I want to thank you all for joining in, for attending, and just say keep safe, keep healthy, and we look forward to the time when we can see one another face to face. Thank you very much. Good night to you all.
Good night. Be well.